Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 27 of the Mind Blown Zone. This one is called What Causes Chickenpox, Smallpox, Measles, etc. I'm going to read the introductory script. Here we go. Most so-called viral childhood diseases like chickenpox, smallpox, measles, and rubella all bear a striking similarity to each other. They all involve the skin. Dr. Harmer discovered that diseases of the outer skin layer, the epidermis, were based on separation conflicts, and those affecting the deeper skin layer, the dermis, were based on attack or feeling soiled or defiled conflicts. Could the cause of these diseases be as simple as the separation of the child from the mother at too young an age and better explain these viral childhood diseases? What do you think, Brad?
Darn good question.
It be?
Darn good question. Could it be? That is the question we hope to answer in this podcast.
And how are you today?
I am never better. And yourself?
Well, good. And I got to tell you, it feels funny asking, how are you today when we already filmed one podcast and I already know how you are.
Technically, for me, it is a new day, or it's about to be a new day. So it was appropriate.
Well, you can still be never better than a couple of hours ago.
It's true, too. Keeps on improving.
All right.
All right.
Well, why don't you launch us in? Explain these unexplainables.
Indeed. Looking forward to it. So this is, obviously, when it comes to the virus question, right, it's we get the cold flu thing catching from the family, and the chickenpox are the questions that people invariably always ask. And they're good questions. And I hope to dive in here today by first explaining a separation conflict. Unfortunately, on the Learning GNM site, this isn't fully explained. So people who haven't had this learned this from the teachers. I learned this from Helmut Pilhar before he passed away last year. So I feel like sharing it with the world would be very helpful. For some reason, it isn't explained in Learning GNM, but we'll get into that. So Dr. Hammer suggests that all these diseases that are on our outer skin, which is our epidermis, are related to some sort of a separation conflict. So even beyond the chickenpox, smallpox, measles, rubella, there are all the other diseases of the skin like eczema, dermatitis, hives, welts, psoriasis, lupus, rosacea, etc., are also related to separation conflicts. And a separation conflict can be one of two things. It can be not wanting to be separated from somebody. I think that's the most common variety, but it can also be wanting to be separated from somebody, but you're not able to for some reason. Mm-hmm. So that's what a separation conflict is. Is that making sense so far, Matt?
Yeah, I think that, that's very concise. I think it's plentifully good enough.
So the people that are most afflicted by separation conflicts are always children there because they're not accustomed to it, and especially the child and the mother. So that's the most traumatic separation conflict there is. And
so
when it comes
usually,
to
right, the people who are most afflicted are usually children,
most prone
is what you meant to say,
right? Sorry, yeah, usually they are, and they're the most prone, and because they haven't experienced any separations yet, right? They're born and they're basically cling to their mother for the first 3, 4, 5 years, whatever, however long it is. And, it's a shock to them to not have their mother, nearby, so the first time they do have a separation, it causes a bit of conflict. And so it makes perfect sense that this would happen to children. As adults, we get a little more accustomed to separating from people. And as Dr. Hummer describes it, they're more susceptible to a generalized separation conflict. I'll explain a local one next. But the generalized means is that their whole body is likely to be affected by the rash, pox, the bumps and mumps and lumps that come up in the skin because they're accustomed to being touched, held, clothed, bathed, handled, hugged, and kissed by, their mother, father, parents, so forth. So there isn't their memory of the person that they're separated from includes their whole body. So that's why they're likely to get that rash and that breakout over larger portions of their skin, as opposed to a psoriasis or an eczema or lupus, which is more localized to a specific location on the body. And that's the localized separation conflict, much more common in adults. And it is localized to where the person remembers touching or being touched by the person that they now feel separated from. You with me on that?
Absolutely.
So what happens now? This is the part that isn't explained on the Learning GNM site. Hopefully that will be updated at some point. What happens is that when the conflict happens, so you feel separated from somebody and you wish you weren't, or you want to be separated from them but can't be, the psyche responds by desensitizing and altering the nerve endings in the epidermis, so that if the child is touched by somebody else, a classmate, a sibling, a teacher, etc., on the body, they won't be reminded of their separation. That's the whole function of this change, is that the psyche doesn't want the child to be reminded of their separation and go back into, a psychological conflict.
So did Dr. Harmer observe the desensitization of nerve endings, or how is this determined?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, and the whole time, of course, there's no bumps or lumps. And he also, I didn't mention it here, but he also mentioned that they go into memory lapses and they kind of lose time, and they go in and out. They're trying, because the psyche doesn't want them to be reminded of their conflict, their separation conflict. So that's more of a psychological aspect of these, but the touching of the skin reminds the child of the parent, and then that upsets them. So that's the purpose of this desensitization of the nerve endings.
Okay, sure.
And yeah, Dr. Harmer absolutely observed it. So this whole time the conflict is going on, there's no rash or, bumps, pox, anything on the body. So it's only after the child resolves the separation conflict. And typically that's just, they start to become accustomed. And, typically this happens when they go to school for the first time. If you'll notice, measles, chickenpox, rubella, all of these tend to happen kindergartners and first graders. Right? It doesn't happen to second, third, fourth, fifth graders very often. So these are the children that
just come again there. What's the typical age? Second graders, did you say?
No, kindergarten and first grade.
Oh, kindergarten and first grade. Is that when it happens? I was wondering before we started. Okay.
That first 3, 4, 5, 6 hours away from mom, they have little moments when they want their mother, they want their mommy, and they're not there, and they start to feel sad about it. And so typically what they'll do is go in and out of that separation conflict for, a few days, a few weeks, maybe a few months. The separation conflict is resolved when mommy picks them up from school, but then the next drop off, the separation conflict starts all over again. And so, and the intensity and duration of that conflict determines which flavor of skin rash the child's going to get now. So, excuse me. And that's when the child resolves it, then the nerve endings are rebuilt so that the child is no longer numbed when that part of the skin is touched. And that's the skin eruptions that we see and the diseases that follow. And we'll talk about that progression in a moment here. I next wanted to talk about the attack or feeling soiled, feeling defiled conflicts. And this is the other variety that we see on the skin. And this is the psyche responding by strengthening really what the main defense layer protecting the inner body cavity and the organs is the dermis. So that's below the epidermis. And so when you feel like you're being soiled, defiled, or attacked, the psyche strengthens the skin in that area where the attack is felt. And the typical diseases around the attack defilement conflicts are acne, melanoma is the most severe, and shingles, adult shingles. And for those of you who don't know, they call shingles adult chickenpox. I want to make that point very clear as we move on here. With me so far?
Yes. So you mentioned acne. So you're saying acne is this feeling attacked conflict?
Yeah, it's a defilement, disfigurement, but I don't want to get into that here today. It's not important, but yes, that is precisely what it is. That's off topic. Just wanted to give some examples of a dermal layer conflict. So I wanted to quickly mention here about the child being removed too early from the parent. there's experts argue about this one a lot. And I think if you, basically in a sense, if you look at, more primitive tribal regions, you'll see that the child typically stays alongside the mother to a much later age than where in the Western society, where we send them off to school at 4 or 5 years old. That child will stay with the mother till, up to 10 years old before it finally starts to feel comfortable being separated for long periods from the mother. So it's just an interesting observation. I don't know, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, are there statistics about less occurrences of pox in these regions or later ages that you're aware of?
Yeah, well, they don't get the chickenpox is pretty common only in Western countries, right?
Oh, okay.
You don't see this. They're going to call it smallpox if it shows up in these other regions. But I think you'll see that they don't have this, government school programs and so forth in a lot of these societies and tribes. And the children stay around their mother or their father, if it's a boy, consistently till a much later age. They're less likely to get these childhood viral diseases. I just thought it was an interesting little side note there. So I mentioned duration and intensity earlier, and that determines what the child's going to get. So rubella, just one of the is the R and the MMR jab, otherwise known as German measles, is the mildest form of a childhood separation conflict, and that indicates it's a fairly short duration separation conflict. And there's only a mild rash, and it's just under the skin, right? It doesn't pierce the skin. There's no bumps or rash or lumps. It's beneath the skin, almost always. So you can see that there wasn't much of desensitization or a change in the nerve endings at all. And they typically just have classic fever, flu-like symptoms during the healing phase: loss of appetite, they're tired, don't feel well, and they have a little, under the skin rash. And that's effectively what rubella is. You've never heard of that, right? Any questions? Okay.
Yeah, I'd never even heard of rubella until today.
It was an old.
Although, you know what? I'd heard of German measles, so now I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
that could be.
Never
heard
of it called rubella.
Australia, America thing there. Yeah, but yeah, it's supposedly a deadly killer of children. Anyway, the next jump up is measles, which is it's a moderate separation conflict, according to Dr. Hammer. And the rash can appear similar to rubella, and it might pop up might pierce the skin a little bit more. But the symptoms are just the same. It's just classic fever, flu-like symptoms, loss of appetite, lethargy. Nothing unique about it. And it all goes away in due time. And there's nothing beyond that, right? Now, why do kids get separate? So think about this now. So Johnny gets measles, and now his brother and sister, Billy and Susie, aren't allowed to go to school. So then they get separated from their schoolmates. And so now they have a separation conflict because they can't go to school. So why do the other kids in the household get it? We're just, it's one separation conflict stacked on top of another. It can very much explain what's going on here. And we'll get to a chickenpox party in a second. But any questions on measles?
No, all good.
All right, chickenpox. So this is the biggie, and I have a personal story to share as well. So this is the longest, more lengthy and severe childhood separation conflict. And obviously this is, the kids get the raised bumps, the pox, the skin eruptions. They call it papullae. And so this is the itchy, bloody scabs and so forth on the skin. And this is the indicator of the chickenpox. And it's just a progression of rubella and measles in reality, according to Dr. Hammer. And again, classic flu-like fever symptoms. How and why anybody thought any of these things were potentially deadly or anything is beyond me. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, other than, people freaking out and being frightened and frightening their children. They have some bumps on their skin. So that gets us all the way to chickenpox parties. And my interesting story is that in first grade, one of my friends got chickenpox, and his mother was best friends with my mother, and they had a chickenpox party at his house. And I had to go over to his house. I had to eat off of the spoon and the fork he was eating off of. I had to drink out of his glass, drink fluids. And they made me take a bath with him. And I think we got to wear like swim
Ah,
trunks or whatever. Yeah, if you can imagine that, I'd take a bath with this kid, and like clockwork, I got chickenpox 3 or 4 days later. So, and there's no way. So I've heard a few GNM experts talk about this as being just an extension of the separation conflict, but there was no separation for me. In fact, my mom was best friends with the mom of this kid, and she was there the whole day that I was at this kid's house at the chickenpox party. So there was never a moment when I felt separated from my mother or anybody else. And so I just got to thinking, well, this doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'm not sure why the other teachers are teaching that. But then it hit me like a ton of bricks that, and this is my own thing, by the way. I don't know that there's any GNM teacher out there teaching this. So I could be wrong about this, but it makes a lot more sense that I suffered an attack, feeling soiled, feeling defiled conflict. Wouldn't you think so, Matt?
well, you've told me this story before, and it makes sense to me. However, I still think that his healing phase of his separation conflict could have triggered your healing phase of your separation conflict that was created earlier when you first went to school.
That's a possibility. But then others, then like there was a day I remember, like, I think I had like 25 kids in my first grade class. I think there were only 5 kids that were in school one day. So basically 20 kids out of 25 caught chickenpox.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how many were at that party. I remember obviously, 5 or 10 of them coming by and doing the things I was doing. But, did we all have separation conflicts, or did we all feel, I felt soiled. I was grossed out the whole day by having to eat off of his stuff and drink off of it. I mean, that was disgusting to me. Absolutely disgusting. I absolutely felt soiled and attacked. No question
I'm
about it.
disgusted just hearing about it. And I think that what you're saying makes perfect sense for sure. One thing that stands out is, you said 4 days later you got it, whereas I don't know. Can you get something as severe as chickenpox in only 4 days of nerve desensitization, or no? What was the attack one?
What's intensity or duration, right? Intensity or duration are keys in understanding. It can be one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
So
I don't know. Your thing makes sense. I just lean towards the other thing, and maybe you had what you think as well.
All I know for sure is I was intensely disgusted by all those things I was made to do that day.
Mm-hmm.
So for what it's worth,
rightly so.
It's awfully strange that adults can't get chickenpox and kids can't get shingles, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's where you just have to fall back on the immune system.
The mythical immune system. So I think, I don't. For me, it makes sense. Like I said, you could be right. No teacher teaches this. This is my own thing. But I think this makes more sense, that it's the first kid that, at a school or class or house that gets chickenpox has the separation conflict, and the rest of the kids suffer an attack conflict if they're forced to, eat and drink and bathe and all the crap I had to do. I think I had to wrestle with him for a while too, which was weird. Anyway, that's my personal story.
I mean, shouldn't the symptoms be perceivably different? I mean, you said that the soiled conflict is a dermis,
right? But it presents as skin eruptions. Yeah, I mean, if you're an expert on the dermis and the epidermis, I know that chickenpox is said to go deep into the epidermis. Sorry, so who's to say it isn't coming from the dermis?
Well, here's one more objection, and then I'll let you go. People have moments in their lives all the time where they feel soiled, right? Like, but I don't see just people randomly getting chickenpox appearing, because you're saying it looks basically identical, but I don't see people just randomly getting chickenpox all the time from feeling soiled.
People don't get chickenpox. Only small children get chickenpox.
Well, an adult should be able to get a feeling soiled conflict as well, right?
They get shingles. That's at the dermis. Right. Chickenpox is the separation conflict.
Shingles is at the dermis.
Right. That's the deeper skin layer. That's the attack conflict.
Is that what you're about to go into right now?
No, it's what I've already talked about.
So are you suggesting that you had shingles?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or
Okay.
adults get chickenpox, however you want to slice it.
Okay. All right. Okay. So you're saying okay. All right. All right. All right. Okay.
Like I said, I'm just throwing it out there. I only go with what makes sense. And my own personal experience, attack, defilement, soil conflict makes a heck of a lot more sense. In fact, it's the only thing that makes sense.
Right. And honestly, I think we both agree that neither of us are too concerned about who's correct in this case. We just think that it's better that people are having the conversation in this way, trying to figure out what causes symptoms, rather than being like, well, according to this document, the CDC says it's this virus, so it must have been that. Like,
right. And the terrain people,
dead end.
The terrain people say it's a childhood detox. It's like a coming of age type of thing, which again doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense.
That doesn't make any sense at all.
I know.
I'm sorry. Whenever I hear this terrain stuff, it's like even worse than the medical establishment, because it's like not all children, like almost all kids, like, get chickenpox. It seems to me, but I don't identify like most kids, like, coming of age or not coming of age. Like, some people stay children forever and stuff, but here's what I'm trying to say. I don't know. I don't correlate any particular observable growing up phase with the chickenpox.
Yeah.
I don't see any correlation there at all.
My recollection is that my sisters never got chickenpox ever, like not when I had it or any other time in their lives. So,
right. Right. That's the counter. They did grow up probably, like, but they didn't get it.
Right. And there's the trained people talk about if you get chickenpox, then you're immune to, you're not going to get all these other adult things. So it's healthy. That's why the parents were told to do the chickenpox parties. You'd be healthier as an adult if you got the chickenpox. And I'm not going to go into all their stuff. I'm not interested in any of it. I don't believe any of it. So, but I was just throwing it out there as there's their explanation. It's always a detox. It's always this mysterious reason why our brilliant bodies store toxins for some untold amount of time and then
right
can't store them any longer, so you get a disease. It's just sorry, doesn't make sense. Anyway, let's keep going. So smallpox is the interesting one here. We may have a little back and forth going on here, but really, you try to go back in time and look and see, what did smallpox look like? And they'll come up with some ridiculous pictures of this kid that's just covered in, bumps and welts. And, this is what smallpox was. But you go back and you read, and I've read some of these old documents, and they're just, I've read dozens and dozens of them where it's just a rash and bumps and pox on the skin, just like anything else. Pustular eczema is one of the tricky little changes they made, but I'll keep going here. So it's really a judgment call by the physician. Is this chickenpox? Is this smallpox? Is this monkeypox? Who knows why the bumps and rashes look like they look, but there is this is the look of this particular pox, right? No such thing out there. There's no consistency. Just like flus, right? It's all over the place. So,
well, I think, when you go to Google or something, you look up some disease, there's no matter what disease you type in, when I say disease, I mean physical symptom, called the disease. Whichever one it is, there's always some extreme case.
Right.
Like, just like out of this world, like you're like, oh my God, look at that. Right. And that makes them kind of look discernible from each other. But these are like ultra rare cases that were worth like taking a photograph and putting in a book,
right,
because of how
crazy it's usually like some African girl or something that just has this. It doesn't even look recognizable, right? It's like, what is that, right? That's smallpox, right? And it's just like them putting pictures of viruses up, right? They're just pictures of little pieces of dead cellular particulates, but they're the experts and they say this is the thing, and so everybody goes okay, right? So, but it's not.
And you're not even generalizing. Like you said, African girl, but I'm looking at the very first picture, and it says smallpox Wikipedia, and it's an African girl with the most horrendous skin condition you've ever seen. Right?
Yeah, there you go. Right.
And the very next one is an African boy with equally bad. Like, I don't know why. Well, yeah, would posit many theories as to why they've put it like that.
They're trying to scare us as usual. Fear, 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 fear,
Right.
fear, fear, fear. So, you know, I've read through many old papers about this. I probably read more about smallpox than anything else, but you go back and you look at some of this information from the late 1800s and early 1900s, and there are plenty of stories out there of doctors that are being encouraged. I mean, you got to know where you're looking, but they were told to diagnose chickenpox if the child had had the smallpox jab. But if the child hadn't had it, then they diagnosed smallpox. Right. So
Oh, that's like with COVID. They're like, oh, this vaccine was only for that variant. You must have got the Delta Lambda Beta variant.
Right.
It's a
Right.
new variant. You're not immune
Or if
to.
sometimes if you had the jab and they had it on record, then they wouldn't test you for COVID. They just assumed you didn't have COVID. So they just play it off like you didn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a tremendous amount of fear mongering going on. And this all comes from a guy named Edward Jenner, who's the founder of vaccines. And back in those days, before it all started, it was a logical, I've talked about this before. There was some logic to it, right? In the sense that, you could build up resistance to things like alcohol. Like a guy who drank all the time could drink a lot more alcohol than a guy who never drank, right? Or you could take, snake venom, and you could take a little bit more and more and more and more and more until eventually you're no longer going to be affected by a snake bite. And that kind of idea was translated over to this idea of vaccines in the beginning. So there was some logic in the beginning, but this Jenner guy just did some horrific stuff and sucked pus off of cow sores and cowpox, and the milkmaid's hands were all perfect and smooth. And it's a weird, bizarro story, but somehow or another, the British government got a hold of this idea and gave this guy a fortune back in, I think it was like 150,000 pounds, like in 1850, which is, that's like, $50 million today or something, right? And said, go at it and, make this new thing. And anyway, it all goes sideways. But the bottom line is clearly an effort to establish a lot of fear. And that's what all these smallpox outbreaks really were. So there's some stories out there, and they're all intended to generate fear. And of course, the one that most people know about isn't, in America, these stories of these smallpox blankets that allegedly the early colonizers were passing out to kill the Native Americans. And this is a super popular story. There's absolutely no evidence to back it up. There's a story or two here or there from, one or two guys that supposedly did this. But the idea that this genocided all these Native Americans is ridiculous. It's a cover story for what they really did, which was that they slaughtered these Native Americans. No question about it.
That is so stupid.
Right?
I mean, if it's a highly contagious disease virus, if it's a highly contagious virus, well, you don't need to pass out blankets, do you? Because it's a highly contagious virus. So which story do they want,
Right. There's another version of this story, which is that this is more in the Western. I think this story is more of the Massachusetts, New England kind of thing going on. But the other stories out in the Western part, where the fur traders and explorers out in Western America would hire the local native tribesmen to help them tan the hides of all the beavers and minks and everything they were capturing. And the main ingredient for tanning hides is arsenic. Of course, the fur traders didn't tell these natives that they were dealing with some highly toxic and poisonous substance. So, their skin starts sloughing off, and they start getting sores all over their bodies. And, the lore grew out of this, that, the white man bringeth disease, right, to the natives. And really, they were just poisoning them with arsenic. So another interesting little side story there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how these stories get going. But a lot of people, this is their proof positive that smallpox is deadly, is the blanket story. But the irony of this, I just wanted to insert this into the middle or towards the end of this, is that has anyone stopped and thought about how a skin rash can kill people? How does it kill you? Just a good question to ask. Is any other skin rash? Well, how could it kill you, right? Unless, that African boy and girl that are obviously covered in something, right? Something bizarre is going
Well,
on
how
with
do
them.
they say it does? Like if I go to Google and type how does smallpox kill, right?
Yeah, do it.
What is their narrative?
Let's see.
Okay, mystery solved. Scientists now know how smallpox kills. Okay, scientific paper here. Let's have a look. How the virus cripples the immune system by attacking molecules made by our bodies to block viral replication. You want me to go any further than that? I mean,
I
that's
don't.
basically what they're saying. It attacks the. I
Attack
mean, so
something that
not
doesn't
only does the
exist.
virus, I mean, the virus has a specific replicating code that causes a skin condition, but it also attacks the immune system. Not that it has any live conscious intention to do so, but it attacks, which is, it's personified, this lifeless thing. It's attacking the immune system. And
You realize,
also the same thing causing the skin condition.
leprechauns attacking unicorns is what you're saying.
Right.
Two things that don't exist: viruses and immune systems. Neither one of them exists. So the whole thing is just complete and absolute propaganda. There's zero proof of any of it. And yet that's their answer. I think what we have here, the answer to your question is bullet F here, which is the Leicester method or the Leicester experiments, which is a region of London, England. And they did this over the course of 15 or 20 years back in the late 1800s. And some enterprising county health official decided not to jab all the children in the Leicester district in many of these years. And instead, they would quarantine any child that had a rash rather than jabbing the whole population of children. And they had remarkably lower deaths due to smallpox than every other region of London, year after year after year. What a shock. So that would lead any sensible person into thinking maybe those smallpox jabs had some nasty ingredients in them, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So there's the answer to your question.
Well, if you
in
were,
large part.
if you were someone who injected it into yourself, it wouldn't lead you to believe that, because if you were to believe that, you'd have to also believe that you're gullible and duped into doing something absolutely stupid.
There you go. And this will be a recurring theme as we move through a couple more podcasts, but they also started to rename smallpox into pustular eczema. We'll hear about this quite a few more times as I go through some of these viral diseases, but that's a quick way to eliminate a disease. So after the jab started going around and they started getting them in all the different countries and cities and so forth, they needed a story. So they couldn't keep having the same smallpox outbreak, so that they changed it to pustular eczema.
Right.
How about that? That's a good way to eliminate a deadly virus, isn't it? Let's just call it something else. Just one of the many tricks that they use. So the last point I have here on smallpox is just that something very similar happened from 2020 through 2022 with the amount of flu cases and deaths happening in America. I don't know what numbers you saw in Australia, but basically nobody had the flu for those 3 years in America. Like literally almost nobody.
Yeah.
And the numbers,
how they
the numbers
managed to get that by.
Nobody's paying attention. People just blind belief. 50, 60, 70,000 flu deaths a year on average in America, 2017, 2018, 2019. And then it's like 30 in 2020. From 60,000 to 30.
Yeah.
So there's
the cognitive dissonance there is insane. I mean, people are like, well, of course there's no flu deaths. It's because we were practicing all these methods to not get viruses transmitted like that. It's like, well, why did you still get COVID? Oh, well, that's different. Different.
Yeah, you can't, there's no point in discussing any further, but there it is. So I've just, all these 2 points to say that disease renaming, very common tactic with these, post-vaccine success stories, shall we say.
Mm-hmm.
All this to get all this to say that smallpox, chickenpox, pustular eczema, psoriasis, all these skin conditions are nothing more than separation conflicts. And that's why they only affect children, because the children aren't ready to be separated from their mothers at such a young age.
Do you want to do you want to go over this, or just quickly mention this idea about how with the, in GNM, it's a conflict that you're not ready for, that's a shock to you. So when you're an adult, you're things like these separations, even if your lover goes away or something like that, you don't react so strongly.
Well, the conflict shock is always unexpected, right? So the child, right, probably doesn't have any problem with their mom dropping him off at school, and he gets to play with his friends and do fun stuff and do his ABCs, and right, everything's going great for a couple days or a couple weeks. But then something happens, and immediately he wants his mother. Right? No one else is going to do for the upset child, right? In that moment, right, the teacher can't solve the problem, right? The principal, right? The kid wants mommy, and mommy's not there. There's your conflict shock. And now the kid's worried that his mother's not around all the time, right? So that's the instance. But same thing can happen with adults, right? It's immediate. Girlfriend walks in the door and breaks up with you and moves out, then boom, right there it is. You weren't expecting that, unless you saw it coming from a mile away. But that's that is the precursor to all conflict shocks.
Happen multiple times.
Or that, yeah, you get used to it. But yeah, it's all unexpected is the key element. And it's important to note that with all these skin rash, childhood viral diseases, quote unquote, that the child stays in conflict for a period of time. They go in and out of that conflict. They don't reach it's hanging healing, as it were. They don't reach the skin eruption, pox, rash period until they're fully over the fact that mommy's not there to be with them for those 4 or 5, 6 hours that they're in school. You got to get used to that. So teacher becomes mommy in effect. Anyway,
right. So
making sense?
You're saying that when the teacher becomes mommy, that's when the teacher becomes mommy, that's when you kind of are over it.
I think so.
When you enter the healing phase.
I think that would probably be a good way to set it up. The kid has to get over it somehow. So he sees, okay, well, my mom's not here, but my teacher plays that role now. Right. So I'm able to relax back into my life at school. Anyway, that is pox and skin. So I got one more last little addition here. Any questions about any of that?
No, good to go.
Okay. So I wanted to do mumps here. We didn't mention it in the title, but we have this thing called the MMR vaccination here in the United States. It's a standard childhood schedule jab, and that's measles, mumps, and rubella. So mumps, totally different from skin conditions, obviously, but it is a childhood, mostly only. Adults can get mumps, but it's mostly children. What in the world would cause mumps? And I don't know if you've ever seen mumps before, but it's like they're beneath their
I'm just
jaw.
Looking at it now,
puffs up. It's like underneath the jaw, right? So that just basically those puff up, and they just get big and inflamed. And so, if you're getting better at your GNM, you can maybe think this one through a little bit. Curious before you read anything, or did you read it? I saw you highlight it. I'll just read it out.
I already read it.
So this is a conflict that a child would have when they can't have or eat something. So they're not able or allowed to eat something. And of course, what aren't children able or allowed to eat? Well, their parents won't let them have the snack, the candy, the chocolate, the cookies, but the child thinks, well, why can't I have it? It's right there. I can see them. They're on top of the refrigerator. So I want candy. And the parents deny them that. And so they have a conflict shock. And their conflict is, I'm not able to or not allowed to eat something. So the psyche responds by saying, oh, you're not able to eat something? Let's let's necrotize or reduce some of your salivary gland tissue in order that we can widen the salivary gland so you get more saliva, so you're able to dissolve this food that you feel like you can't eat. That's its reaction to the I can't eat something conflict. And so we have a necrotization of the salivary gland tissue. And that goes on for as long as the child feels it's unable to eat something. And then when the child resolves the conflict, what do we get? We get inflammation, the healing process kicks in, swelling, and we get classic mumps beneath the jawline. And that's the mumps.
Okay, so how about this? Like you say that the psyche identifies, oh, I'm not able to eat something, right? So let's widen the, do you pronounce it salivary glands?
Salivary,
right?
yeah.
But salivary glands, but it almost makes the psyche seem almost daft. Because, you know, if you could explain to it, you'd be like, no, it doesn't matter how much you widen the salivary glands. I literally can't eat it. It's up on the fridge. They don't let me eat it. So
right.
why does the psyche go, oh, we need to do this silly thing? It's like, no, I can't eat it. Like, why does it get this almost mistaken? Like, it doesn't do it correctly.
It's obviously it's taking figurative thoughts literally is what it's doing. So this child saying, figurative I can't eat literally. Something. That's always the translation, that the psyche does not think figuratively. It can't translate. It doesn't understand that figurative. That's the way it works.
There's a lot of the a lot of the ones we talked to about so far, these separation conflicts were quite literal, to do with literally touching the skin.
Right, but it's still, the kid isn't thinking my skin reminds me of my mom, right?
Oh, yeah.
The psyche's just reacting to I don't want the child to remember the mom because it upsets the child. So this is my way of minimizing the memory of the mother, the missed mother. So yeah, I'm sure Dr. Hammer spent a lot of time on this one, but it makes sense, right? And I'm making that last bullet note there that, you know, it doesn't have to be a food, right? So it could be a figurative. I think there's a picture of Sidney Crosby. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a really good NHL player for Pittsburgh Penguins, but he apparently was in the midst of some contract negotiation or something, and it wasn't going well. And he's out doing a press conference, and he's got mumps. So he was unable to eat perhaps a big bonus in his salary negotiations or something like that. So there's your even a further example of how figurative it can be.
Well, how do you know whether it's going to be like, oh, I can't swallow that or I can't eat that? Like, what determines these subtleties?
Yeah, it's can you get it into your mouth, right? That's where you go. It's where you go from the mouth stuff to the throat stuff to the thyroid, right, to the esophagus, to the stomach, to the intestine, to the colon, right? So it's like I got a hold of it. Basically, this one, like mumps and mouth stuff, is I can't even get it into my mouth. That's effectively what those are, right? You get it in your throat, it's like you got it in your mouth, but you can't swallow it for some reason. You can't swallow this situation. That's your throat problems. Like I couldn't swallow the vegetables that I put in my mouth and make a giant scene of at the dinner table when I had to eat them to get my snack. I told that story before, right? So
there seems to be some metaphor here where there's like the object, and you want to 1 second. Either you want to get that object closer to you, into you, to merge with you somehow, or you want it to be away from you, right? And the digestive tract or something like that is almost like this metaphysical body. It's like this body manifestation that goes with the idea of objects out there and having them come toward you or go away from you. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. The alimentary canal, the digestive tract, if you will, right, is the mouth, the throat, stomach, intestines, rectum, colon, right? That lungs, kidneys as well. That's the most primitive part of you, right? That's the oldest original part of the human body. That's the endodermic tissue that comes from the brain stem, which is the reptilian brain, if you will. And it's only concerned with what Dr. Hammer would call morsel, right? This morsel idea, right? Basically food, water, oxygen, and procreation is all that's concerned with. So it's just the basic necessities of life are all it's concerned with. So
well, I don't really believe in that evolution stuff, but what's that other word that refers to the study of like early embryological ideas?
Yeah.
Right. I can see it relating in that way, because like when you're whatever an embryo, yeah, like your life pattern is like just taking things in and passing them out. Bring this thing into me, pass it out of me, and those patterns kind of seem to manifest in how we live our lives as adults.
That's exactly what Dr. Hammer was especially an expert on, was embryological studies. That's how he figured this all out.
Right.
It's like if he wouldn't have been an expert on that, he may have never figured all this stuff out. But yeah, it's the alimentary canal is what we share in common with basically all living organisms, right? Everything has a mouth and a stomach and an anus, right? That's from the worm on up. Everybody's got that basic setup. You with me?
Yeah.
Except for the virus, of course. It has none of those things. It doesn't have anything.
Yet has evil intentions and carries them out.
It has nothing. It has no will, no brain, no stomach, no mouth, no nothing. Doesn't eat, doesn't breathe, doesn't sleep. It's just a chunk of nothingness, and yet it causes 50 different terrible diseases, according to the experts. Ludicrous. Anyway, there you have it. That's my MMR/pox/separation and attack conflict coverage. So I'm glad to get this one off my chest so everybody can now come and listen to what causes chickenpox. Far more sensible
healing phase related to the chest.
What's that? What?
I said now you can go into some healing phase related to your chest. As soon as you've gotten this off your chest.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Now you're going to get some symptoms, right?
Finally relax. Well, at least it's out there. So these are the, colds, flus, COVID, chickenpox. These are the ones that nobody else is offering a viable answer for. So here it is, from basically straight from Dr. Hammer.
Okay, perfect. Do you want to mention take your power back related to this?
Sure. I mean, just in the sense that this is, eliminating the fear of viruses is a huge step in taking your power back, right? It's one less thing out there that's ruining my life. So in that sense, this leads in nicely to take your power back. Or, a big part of that course is obviously experiential, but I think part of that experience is lifting people up and out of, the lower Hawkins consciousness levels, and their ability to discern truth from falsehood starts to increase exponentially as they drop the fear, drop the false beliefs, and move in a direction of, non-victimhood and more control and responsibility in their hands. Then absolutely, this dovetails nicely with exactly that.
Yeah. I think, this whole belief in viruses is symbolic of this belief in a cruel universe with evil entities that are out to get you. And you can't see them, and they're all around you, and they're attacking you and causing you all this pain and sickness and destroying you, like even potentially killing you. I mean, it's just fascinating, the capacity for us to believe in something that we can't see and nobody can produce a sample of for us to see. And we're just like, yep, totally exists. There's all different types of them. They work in all these funny ways. And I really think it's just a projection of just this cruel universe and victim mentality operating. So when you do take your power back You want to interject something?
I was going to say it's just been pounded into our brains all our lives. So it's understandable
Mhm.
that people believe that.
It's understandable.
Go ahead.
It's understandable. Yeah, but when you do take your power back, it's not all about viruses. We're not talking about viruses, but we are talking about elevating your consciousness and how you connect with life and your metaphysics. And, you come out the other side of it comfortable and safe in the universe and feeling happy and feeling love instead of fear. So, and that has this effect of now you feel secure against viruses and you don't feel like you're going to get sick. And that worry is out of your life.
That's right. It helps you tune into reality and out of this insanity that we've been taught. That's what it does.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You don't need information from anybody else. You know it, like experientially, yeah, that's a bunch of bunk. Of course it is.
Mm-hmm.
Just starts to dawn on you.
It breeds a lot of independence.
You can just see it. It's hard to describe, but you can just see when someone's talking about something that's nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Starts to happen for you. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense at all. Those kind of things just start to happen, and you don't need anyone to teach you anything, right? It's just like, oh yeah, it's like, everything. The deeper you get into take your power back, the more you take on the practices and really, embody those and take them into your daily living. You don't need any information from anybody ever again. You got all the answers you need for yourself. Simple as that.
Yeah, you'll never need to watch another news anchor tell you what's up.
Yeah.
Tell you what's what.
Yeah, never again.
You won't need to tune into Tucker Carlson to tell you how the world works.
And he's the best one out there.
He's a likable kind of guy.
Well,
he's the best.
Only
you won't
one
even need Tucker
approaching the truth out there. So there's a lot more people you could pick on, but yeah, most of the rest of them are just telling you flat out lies. So at least he's got a little truth built into his presentations. But yeah, there you have it. So again, the goal of these is, as I promised in the disease and virus podcast, is just to say, yeah, when people are confronted with this for the first time, I've mentioned this before, but I see their reactions, and for them, there's no other possibility but viruses. Like it can't be anything else. And it's shocking for me to see that. Say, well, if viruses don't exist, then it has to be something else. But they come right back to me with, yeah, but it can't be anything else, so it has to be viruses. And it's interesting that there's some, mental egregore block there that won't let them even stop and pause and consider maybe there is something, other explanations, right? I don't know what it is exactly, but I see that. And you can see it in their eyes. They're not interested in any other explanations. So hopefully someday this podcast will help some people jump that hurdle. Because what Dr. Hammer found, I think the time's makes coming. A whole lot of sense. Yeah, I hope so. We shall see, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, another great podcast. Appreciate all your inquisitive questions and commentary, Matt. You did another nice job. I think this one went well.
Well, you as well. Great information as always.
Straight from Dr. Hammer. He had this stuff figured out. That is for sure. Happy to spread.
Yeah, he was the man. Smart guy.
Knowledge of a genius. Let it get out there a little bit to a little wider audience. So as always, we look forward to your questions, comments, and we will certainly respond to those and or include them in a future podcast if they're forthcoming.
Mm-hmm. All right, then. Well, thanks, Brad, and thanks, everyone, for listening. Hope you have a great day.
Indeed. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everybody. And we look forward to you all joining our next podcast. Bye for now.